He didn't lift his head when Dr. Willis paused by his enclosure that final Thursday. Rambo was a label, not a name. Case 2847 was a statistic. His world had narrowed to shadows and the scent of disinfectant. Once, perhaps, he'd been vibrantly red, a streak of wildfire through evergreens. Now his coat hung in dull, patchy clumps. His muscles had melted away, leaving a skeletal frame that trembled even in sleep. The death warrant was signed. His final hours bled away in that stark cell. No one knew his history. Had he been an ill-fated pet? A cub torn too soon from den and mother? The questions died unasked. Only the relentless tick of the clock above his cage marked time running out for a soul deemed beyond saving. The phone's sharp jangle shattered the grim quiet of Dr. Willis's office at 1:47 p.m. Thursday. She answered, bracing for another difficult conversation about logistics, about endings. But the voice on the line was Maddie Cooper, founder of Wild Whisper Sanctuary, a place whispered about in rehab circles for embracing the hopeless cases. Margaret, heard about your bobcat, Fox, sorry. Scheduled tomorrow. Pause crackled down the line. Send me his file. Every scrap. We'll take him. Margaret's breath caught. Take him? A fox hours from death? A creature with no rehab potential? Maddie's voice held no hesitation, only fierce conviction. Just get him to us. We'll meet destiny halfway. In that instant, the death warrant dissolved. Maddie Cooper didn't ask permission. She offered defiance. Her sanctuary, Wild Whisper, nestled deep in Oregon's timbered hills, was a beacon for creatures other centers turned away. As her specially outfitted van ate up the miles towards Pine Ridge, a phone call pulsed across states to Fox Hollow Farm in Vermont. Dr. Jordan Tate, retired after 30 years of mending horses and cattle, and his wife Dr. Juniper Lane, whose skilled hands had assisted in thousands of surgeries, listened. Maddie's words painted a dire picture. Emaciation, trauma, a spirit utterly broken. He needs more than medicine, folks, Maddie's voice crackled. He needs a miracle wrapped in patience. You're his last chance. Silence stretched. Then Jordan, his voice roughened by years and compassion, spoke for them both. Bring him home. 3 days. 3 days trapped in the rattling belly of Maddie's van, breathing diesel fumes and despair. The fox, now christened Finn by a hopeful Maddie, lay motionless in his padded crate. His breathing was shallow, his eyes closed. Maddie watched him in the rearview mirror as rain slashed the windshield somewhere in Nebraska, the plains stretching endlessly gray. Stay with me, Finn, she murmured, a prayer against the road noise. Almost there. Just hold on. Doubt was a cold passenger. What if the journey itself killed him? What if Fox Hollow, for all its good intentions, was merely a prettier place to die? The headlights cut through the gathering Vermont dusk on the third night, illuminating the sign for Fox Hollow Farm. Jordan and Juniper stood on the porch, silhouetted against warm light, their faces etched with worry and unwavering hope. The crate door swung open in Fox Hollow's quarantine room, a space built for fragile new beginnings. What emerged wasn't a predator, but a wraith. Finn's body seemed to fold in on itself, all sharp angles and matted, lifeless fur. A faint, sour odor of sickness clung to him. Dr. Jordan Tate, whose large hands had calmed terrified stallions, felt his own tremble. Dr. Juniper Lane pressed a hand to her mouth, swallowing hard against the lump in her throat. "Oh, Jordan," she breathed, the words thick. "He's hollow." The fox didn't snarl, didn't hiss. He simply shrank into the farthest, darkest corner of the room, pressing his skeletal body against the cool wall, his gaze fixed on some unseen horror only he could see. The magnitude of the task before them settled like a physical weight. Days bled into a week, then 2. Bowls of finely minced raw rabbit, rich with scent, sat untouched. Platters of fresh quail eggs gathered due. Finn refused it all. He drank only sparingly, his movements slow, lethargic. He seemed less a living creature and more a shadow dissolving in the weak quarantine room light. Juniper took to sitting for hours just outside his enclosure, her voice a soft, steady current reading poetry or humming old folk songs, Shenandoah, Red River Valley. Jordan brought his weathered Martin guitar, fingers picking gentle melodies that had once soothed colicky calves. Finn remained curled tight, a closed fist of fur and bone. "He's choosing to leave us, Junie," Jordan whispered one evening, defeat heavy in his voice. Juniper reached for his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Then we choose louder, Jordan. We choose until he hears us." Day 18 dawned brittle and cold. Juniper carried her grandmother's wicker knitting basket into the quarantine room. Settling into her familiar chair just outside Finn's enclosure, she pulled out skeins of vibrant crimson wool and long, silver needles. Click, click, click. The rhythmic sound filled the sterile space, a counterpoint to Finn's shallow breathing. She kept her gaze lowered, focused on the emerging scarf, pouring her silent plea into every stitch. Live. Choose life. Stay. Minutes stretched. Then, a subtle shift. A rustle of straw. Juniper's heart hammered against her ribs, but her hands never faltered. Click, click, click. Slowly, agonizingly, Finn uncurled. He didn't approach the untouched food. He inched forward, a fraction at a time, his dull eyes fixed not on Juniper, but on the mesmerizing dance of those flashing silver needles. It wasn't hunger moving him. It was curiosity, a fragile thread spun in the quiet. The next morning, routine held. Juniper placed Finn's bowl, freshly filled with choice rabbit meat, just inside the enclosure gate. She straightened, preparing to retreat, giving him the space he always demanded. As she turned, a sound stopped her cold. Not a growl, not a hiss, a soft, rasping chirp, like dry leaves skittering on pavement. Juniper froze, scarcely daring to breathe. Finn stood near the bowl, not eating, but looking directly at her. His thin tail gave the faintest twitch. He opened his mouth again, and the sound came once more hesitant, questioning. It wasn't about the food. It was acknowledgement, a signal. Juniper felt the hot sting of tears blur her vision. Weeks of empty bowls, weeks of a heart aching with helplessness, cracked open by a single, raspy wild voice saying, "Perhaps I'm still here." She slowly knelt, tears tracing paths down her cheeks, landing not on sterile concrete, but on the fertile ground of hope reborn. Click, click, click. Juniper's needles danced like metronomes counting Finn's fragile seconds. She dared not look up, not even when his wet nose pressed against the chain link, fogging the metal. His breath hitched, a soft, ragged sound. Slowly, as if moving through deep water, Finn lowered his bony flank to the concrete floor, his eyes never leaving the shimmering silver. Not at the untouched rabbit, not at escape, just the rhythm, the scarlet yarn pooling in Juniper's lap like spilled lifeblood. For 20 minutes, the only sounds were wool sliding, needles clicking, and one broken fox remembering how to breathe. That night, Jordan carried his old Martin to the quarantine room. Moonlight silvered the floorboards as he strummed Wildwood Flower, a tune he'd played for dying calves and colicky foals. Finn remained statue-still in the shadows. Then a tremor. A single paw stretched forward, nails scraping concrete. Jordan's breath caught mid-chord. The fox didn't come closer, but his ears, tufted, ragged things, twitched, not in fear, in recognition, as if the melody were a key scraping rust from a long-locked door inside his soul. Hope, Jordan realized with a lump in his throat, sometimes wore the face of an old country song. 3 days later, Juniper placed Finn's breakfast bowl down and didn't leave. She sat cross-legged on the cold floor, her back against the chain link. Finn eyed her, eyed the venison. Then, with agonizing slowness, he crept forward and took a single bite. And another. Juniper held perfectly still, until she heard it. Low, guttural, vibrating deep beneath matted fur. Purr. Not the smooth hum of a house cat, but the rusty grumble of an engine coughing back to life after years in the rain. Tears blurred her vision. In 15 years of veterinary work, she'd never heard a sound more sacred. Jordan noticed it first, the rabbit carcass stripped clean, while chicken lay ignored. He's choosing Junie, he whispered, wonder in his voice. They experimented. Quail eggs, snubbed, salmon, devoured, blueberries, played with, then squashed. Finn's preferences emerged like buried treasure. Juniper began hand-feeding him slivers of rabbit heart, her fingers trembling near those sharp teeth. He took the morsels with shocking gentleness, his rough tongue brushing her skin like sandpaper. He knows, she breathed, knew her scent, knew her heartbeat, knew she was the keeper of the good red meat, a pact sealed in protein and trust. The morning frost still clung to Fox Hollow's grass when Juniper entered the enclosure. Finn watched from his platform, amber eyes unreadable. She busied herself refreshing his water, pretending not to notice him leap down. Out of the corner of her eye, a flash of red fur, then warmth, pressure. Finn pressed his whole flank against her leg, his fur bristly and alive. Juniper froze. His head swung around, nudging her knee. Not for food, for contact. His raspy purr vibrated through her jeans as he leaned his full weight into her. She sank her fingers into his scruff, feeling the wild heartbeat thrum against her palm. Decades of clinical detachment shattered in that single, wordless touch. Jordan was mending a pasture fence when Juniper's shout tore across the yard raw, trembling. He dropped his hammer, running. He found her in the enclosure, kneeling in the straw, Finn's head resting in her lap. The fox's eyes were closed, his body limp with utter contentment. He climbed into my lap, Jordan, Juniper sobbed, her hands buried in his thickening fur. Just laid down and sighed. Jordan's calloused hand touched Finn's shoulder. The fox opened one eye, regarded the man who'd sung him back from the edge, and rumbled that rusty purr again. No crate, no fear, just belonging. The truth hung between them, heavy and sweet. This wild heart had chosen its home. Bear, their ancient golden retriever, had watched Finn's journey from the farmhouse porch. That afternoon, as Juniper led Finn into the fenced yard for his first sunlight in months, Bear ambled down the steps. He stopped 10 feet away, his tail giving a single solemn wag. Finn froze, ears flat. Bear didn't approach, didn't bark. He simply lowered his grizzled muzzle to the grass inside, his warm brown eyes holding the fox's gaze. An hour passed. Finn took one step, then another. Bear never moved. A silent, sun-warmed sentinel saying, "You're safe here." When Finn finally basked in a sunbeam, Bear closed his eyes. Guardian duty, it seemed, wasn't just for sheep. Zoe, their skittish border collie, was less accepting. The first time she saw Finn through the screen door, she exploded. A frenzy of high-pitched barks and scrabbling claws. Finn recoiled, hackles raised. Zoe hurled herself at the door, teeth bared. Jordan grabbed her collar. "Zoe, enough!" But the damage was done. Finn fled to his crate, trembling. Juniper found him there hours later, eyes wide and vacant again. The fragile piece threatened to unravel. One step forward, 2 panic steps back. Zoe's fear echoed the wilderness still haunting Finn's bones. The accident happened on laundry day. Jordan, arms piled high with sheets, nudged the sliding porch door open with his hip, and forgot to latch it. Finn, napping in a sunbeam, saw his chance. In a flash of red, he darted inside the farmhouse. Zoe, dozing on the rug, shot up like a firework. Chaos erupted. Zoe charged, snarling. Finn scrambled onto the sofa, knocking over a lamp. Feathers from a torn pillow swirled like snow. Jordan yelled. Juniper dropped her basket. And in the eye of the storm, Finn stood on the back of the couch, staring down at the hysterical collie, and didn't flinch. Silence crashed down. Zoe stood panting at the couch's base, confusion replacing fury. Finn gazed down, his tufted ears pricked forward. Not in aggression, in assessment. Slowly, deliberately, he stepped off the couch, not fleeing, approaching. Zoe let out a low whine. Finn stopped a foot away. His nose twitched. Zoe's tail gave a tentative flick. Juniper held her breath. Jordan's hand tightened on a broom handle. Then, Finn stretched his neck, not to bite, to sniff. His wet nose touched Zoe's trembling ear. The collie flinched, but held her ground. A heartbeat passed. 2. Finn turned, padded calmly back to his sunbeam on the porch, and began washing his paw. Zoe stared after him, then whirled and bolted under the bed. The war was over, an uneasy truce, brokered not by humans, but by the wild grace of a fox who refused to be afraid. Autumn painted Fox Hollow in fiery hues. Juniper gathered fallen maple leaves, crimson, gold, amber, and scattered them in Finn's enclosure. What happened next defied reason. The fox didn't pounce or shred. He selected each leaf with delicate precision, sniffing deeply before placing it in a growing pile by his sleeping nook. Some he'd carry for hours like treasures. Jordan caught him gently mouthing a perfect scarlet leaf, eyes half closed in bliss. "He's collecting memories," Juniper whispered. Memories, perhaps, of forests he'd never known. Or maybe he just loved how October tasted. Zoe watched Finn's leaf ritual with border collie intensity. One crisp morning, she snatched a golden maple leaf midair as it fluttered down. Triumphant, she pranced, then stopped, chewed, gagged, spat it out with dramatic disgust. Finn observed, unimpressed. The next day, Zoe did it again, and again. It became their absurd dance. Finn solemnly curating his collection. Zoe stealing, chewing, and recoiling from the offending foliage. Juniper filmed their antics, laughter echoing across the frost-kissed yard. In that silly ritual, the last tight coil of Zoe's fear finally unwound. Rocking on the porch swing under a quilt her mother had stitched, Juniper voiced the thought haunting them both. Wild whisper called Jordan. Sanctuary space opened up. She felt Finn's weight against her legs where he slept, his rhythmic purr vibrating through the wool. Jordan stared at the first winter stars. "He's not releasable," he said quietly. "Too imprinted." The silence stretched, filled only by Finn's contented sighs. Juniper's hand found Jordan's. "I know it's not the plan, but this wild heart?" Her voice broke. "It's already home." Jordan squeezed back. No words needed. The fox curled deeper between them, sealing the vow. The battle for Finn's future waged in ink and bureaucracy. Permits for a non-releasable native species. Inspections. Zoning hearings. Jordan spent days at the county office, Juniper compiling veterinary affidavits. "He's family," she insisted to skeptical officials. "Not a pet. Family." One inspector, a stern woman named Gail, arrived unannounced. She watched Finn gently take a blueberry from Juniper's palm, then curl beside Zoe as the collie napped. Gail didn't speak. She simply nodded, stamped the forms, and left a business card. Call if he needs anything. The dream had a name now, etched on permits. Finn of Fox Hollow. Sanctuary wasn't a place. It was belonging. The first snow fell at midnight, thick, silent, transforming Fox Hollow into a pearl-white world. Juniper opened Finn's door at dawn. He crept out, sniffed the alien whiteness, then exploded, leaping, twisting, burrowing muzzle first into drifts. He raced in wild circles, kicking up glittering showers, stopping only to shake his fur like a dog. Zoe bounded after him, barking joy. Finn playbowed, snow clinging to his whiskers. Juniper laughed, tears freezing on her cheeks. In that moment, he wasn't a broken refugee or a legal case. He was pure, uncaged wildness. A red streak of defiance against the white, dancing under a slate-gray Vermont sky. A sound tore through the farmhouse in the deepest dark, primal, mournful, echoing off frozen hills. Juniper bolted upright. Finn stood at the bedroom window, fur bristling, head thrown back in a howl that vibrated the glass. Not a bark. A true wild fox's cry, haunting and ancient. Zoe whimpered under the bed. Jordan reached them as the last note faded. Finn trembled, staring into the moonlit woods. He heard them, Juniper whispered. A distant answer cry floated back. Faint, feral. Finn's ears swiveled. He looked at Juniper, then turned away from the window, curled silently on her discarded robe. The wild had called. He'd chosen warmth. The Christmas tree stood glittering in the farmhouse corner. Finn investigated. A dark nose twitching at tinsel, a paw batting a low-hanging ornament. Juniper turned her back for 1 minute. A crash. Shrieks. Zoe barking madly. Finn crouched inside the toppled tree, tangled in lights, pine needles stuck to his fur, looking utterly pleased. Finn Alexander Tate. Juniper scolded, trying not to laugh. He wriggled free, trotted to Jordan's recliner, and deposited a chewed candy cane at his feet. An offering. That year, the tree leaned drunkenly in the corner, adorned only with unbreakable felt birds, and Finn slept beneath it nightly, guarding his conquered forest. Bear slowed that winter. His walks grew shorter, his naps longer. Finn seemed to sense it. He stopped pestering the old retriever for play, instead curling beside him on the hearth rug, sharing warmth. One bitter January morning, Bear didn't rise. Jordan carried him to the vet. Juniper sat on the floor. Finn pressed hard against her side as the truck pulled away. When Jordan returned alone, eyes red-rimmed, Finn met him at the door. He nudged Jordan's hand, then led him to Bear's empty bed. Finn circled it 3 times, and lay down where Bear's head should be, guarding the void. A silent promise. I remember. Bear's absence was a physical ache. Zoe refused to go near his bed. But Finn claimed it. He'd lie there for hours, nose buried in the faded fabric where Bear's scent lingered. Sometimes he'd whine softly, a sound Juniper had never heard. She'd sit beside him, her hand buried in his thick ruff. I miss him too, sweet boy, she'd murmur. Finn would lift his head, amber eyes holding hers with an understanding that pierced her soul. In that shared grief, something shifted. The wild fox wasn't just their healer anymore. They were his. Zoe surprised them. Without Bear's calming presence, she sought Finn. She'd follow him on yard patrols, mimicking his alert stance. When strangers visited, Zoe positioned herself between them and the fox, not barking, just watching. One icy afternoon, Finn slipped on a frozen puddle. Before Juniper could react, Zoe darted in, nudging him upright with her nose. Finn shook himself off and bumped his head against her flank. Thanks. That night, Zoe didn't sleep under the bed. She curled up on Bear's old cushion, Finn warm against her back. The pupil had become the protector. Fox Hollow's pack had reshaped itself around a missing piece and held strong. Juniper sat on the porch steps, the embroidery hoop trembling in her hands. The news had come that morning. Her dearest friend, Evelyn, was gone. Silent tears traced paths through wrinkles earned by decades of laughter. She didn't hear Finn pad across the dew-slick grass. Didn't feel him until his weight settled against her hip, his warm chin resting on her knee. He nudged her hand with a cold nose, leaving a single, perfect maple leaf in her palm. Then he laid his head in her lap and simply waited. No wildness in him then, just stillness, a red-furred anchor in the storm of her grief. Her fingers sank into his ruff, clutching fur instead of thread. The stitches could wait. Some wounds needed wild comfort. When Jordan's grandchildren visited, rules were strict. No chasing, no loud noises, hands flat like this. Little Liam, just 5, knelt in the grass, palm outstretched, holding his breath. Finn emerged from the ferns, sniffing the air. 1 step, 2. His wet nose bumped Liam's fingers. The boy giggled, a sound like wind chimes. "He's soft, Grandpa." Finn tolerated the clumsy petting, amber eyes half closed. Later, Liam drew a picture. A stick-figure man, a smiling boy, and a fox with ears too big. Scrawled beneath it, "Me and Grandpa and Alexander Finn." The name stuck. Alexander Finn Tate. Not a pet. Family. Juniper hid plastic eggs filled with dog treats for Zoe. Finn watched from the porch, tail twitching. The second her back was turned, chaos. A red blur streaked across the yard, snatching eggs midair, shaking them like woodland prey. Crack. Purple plastic shattered. Treats flew. Zoe barked indignantly as Finn proudly paraded a mangled egg carcass, dropping it at Juniper's feet like a trophy. "Alexander Finn Tate," she scolded, trying to hide her smile. He yipped, spun in a circle, and snatched another egg. That Easter, the hunt ended early. Juniper served treats in a bowl, while Finn napped atop his hoard of broken pastel shells, the conquering wild. Dr. Noah Reed's stethoscope lingered too long. The silence in the exam room thickened. Finn panted on the table, trusting. "It's cardiomyopathy, Juniper," Noah finally said, his voice gravel. "Common in captive foxes." His heart's enlarged, struggling. Juniper's own heart stuttered. Jordan gripped the table's edge. "How long?" Noah sighed. "Months? A year? Medication can help. But it's a thief. Steals their breath." Finn nudged Juniper's trembling hand. His trusting eyes held no fear, only the now. As they drove home, Vermont's green hills blurred outside the window. The shadow they'd outrun for years had finally found them. No more clinic visits. Finn panicked in cages, so Dr. Noah came to Fox Hollow. Under the ancient oak where Bear once slept, they set up Finn's 4 fluids and heart meds. Jordan held him steady. Juniper whispered stories into his tufted ear. "Remember the snow dance? The Christmas tree war?" Finn's gaze stayed fixed on the woods beyond the fence. Noah slid the needle in. Finn flinched, but didn't struggle, just leaned harder into Jordan. Drip, drip, drip. Medicine flowed into his vein. Zoe lay nearby, watchful. The oak leaves rustled secrets. Healing wasn't always gentle. Sometimes, it came with needles and tears under a too bright sun. The meds carved hollows beneath Finn's eyes. He slept more, chased less. Then one August evening, as the sky bled orange and purple, Finn stood at the fence. Zoe joined him, a low whine built in his throat. Juniper moved to soothe him, but Jordan stopped her. Watch! Finn's muscles coiled. With a burst of his old wildfire energy, he tore across the yard, not fleeing but flying. Zoe raced beside him, barking joy. He leaped, twisted, snatched a moth from the air. For 3 glorious minutes he was young again. Then he staggered, panting, and collapsed in the clover. Juniper rushed to him. Finn licked her hand, his sides heaving, eyes bright. Worth it, that gaze said. Some fires burn brightest just before dark. Dr. Margaret Willis arrived unannounced, carrying guilt like old luggage. I had to know, she whispered. Juniper led her to the oak tree. Finn basked in dappled light. Zoe pressed against his side. Margaret froze. That's not possible. Finn lifted his head. Amber eyes met hers. No recognition, just calm curiosity. Margaret sank to her knees. Case 2847. Her hand hovered, trembling, over his thick ruff. Finn nudged it. Permission. As her fingers touched fur she'd last felt over brittle bone, tears fell. I signed his death warrant, she choked. Juniper's hand settled on her shoulder. He rewrote it, Margaret, with help. Under the oak, 2 healers wept, while a fox napped in the sun, a living eraser to past regrets. Evenings became sacred. Finn claimed the wicker porch rocker, Juniper's mother's favorite. As fireflies sparked in the gathering dark, he'd leap up, circle 3 times, and settle. Jordan would bring his guitar, Juniper her knitting. Zoe flopped at their feet. Finn's eyes would drift closed, his purr a rusty counterpoint to the cricket's choir. Sometimes Jordan sang Wildwood Flower, the song that first cracked Finn's walls. The fox's ear would twitch. A ghost of a smile, Juniper swore, would touch his muzzle. No documents, no diagnoses mattered here. Just rocking, just purring, just a wild heart, keeping time with their own. A vixen's cry sliced through the September night. Close, piercing. Finn rocketed off the porch, hitting the fence at full speed. He stood rigid, nostrils flaring, every muscle taut. The call came again. Closer, enticing. Zoe whined, pressing against Juniper's legs. Finn scrabbled at the fence post. For one heart-stopping moment, Juniper thought he'd try to leap. Then he stopped, turned. His gaze found Juniper in the porch light. He took 3 slow steps back, then sat. The vixen called once more, unanswered. Finn lowered his head. When he returned to the rocker, he didn't purr. He laid his muzzle on Juniper's foot. A choice made, not from weakness, from love written deeper than instinct. October returned. Finn moved slower now, his breath a fragile whistle. Juniper gathered his beloved maple leaves, piling them by his rocker. He sorted them with fading precision, crimson first, then gold, amber last. One flawless scarlet leaf he kept apart. On a cool twilight, as Jordan strummed Red River Valley, Finn nudged Juniper's hand. The scarlet leaf lay on her palm. He licked her fingers once, then rested his head on her knee, his eyes fixed on the distant woods. His purr was faint, like wind through bare branches. Juniper cradled the leaf, his last treasure. Outside, the first snowflakes began to fall, melting on fur still warm with borrowed time. The farmhouse ticked like an old clock counting down. Finn's breathing grew thin, a papery rustle with every rise of his chest. Juniper moved his rocker bedside. That night, under a hunter's moon, he stirred. Weak legs carried him to her sleeping form. Cold nose pressed to her temple. Once, twice, a sound escaped him. Not a chirp, not a purr, but a sigh that held worlds. Thank you for staying. Then he burrowed into the hollow of her neck, his weight familiar as a heartbeat. Jordan watched from the doorway, tears carving paths through his stubble. Some goodbyes need no words, just warmth in the dark. Dawn came soft as thistledown. Juniper woke to stillness. No rasping breath, no twitching dreams. Finn lay curled against her, muzzle resting on her hand, amber eyes closed. Peace etched his face. No tension in the jaw, no furrow between his ears. Just stillness. Jordan knelt beside them, fingers tracing the velvet edge of one ear. "Oh, little warrior," he whispered. Outside, a red-tailed hawk screamed. Zoe padded in, sniffed Finn's still form, and lay down beside the bed, head on paws, guarding the silence. Case 2847 wasn't a number anymore. He was Alexander Finn Tate, and he'd flown beyond every cage. Dr. Margaret Willis sent a sapling, a young sugar maple wrapped in burlap. For Finn's leaves, the note read. They planted it near the old oak where Bear slept. As Jordan tamped earth around its roots, Juniper scattered Finn's hoard of dried leaves, crimson, gold, amber, into the hole. Zoe watched, then trotted off. She returned with Finn's favorite stuffed goose, dropping it at the sapling's base. A tribute. Wind stirred the fragile branches. Somewhere, Juniper imagined Finn's approval. Yes, this is where wild things grow. The porch felt hollow. Juniper couldn't bear the rocking chair. Empty now, no red fur nestled in its cushions. But Zoe claimed it. Every evening at dusk, she'd leap up, circle 3 times just as Finn had, and settle, eyes fixed on the treeline. No whining, no restlessness, just waiting. One chilly twilight, Juniper joined her. She rocked slowly, Zoe's head heavy on her lap. Together, they watched fireflies stitch the dusk with light. The chair creaked its old song. Some absences, Juniper realized, become sacred spaces. Maddie Cooper's call came in spring. Orphaned fox kits, Juniper. 3 of them. Mother hit by a log truck near Ho. Juniper's throat tightened. Jordan saw her hand tremble. "We're not ready," she whispered. Maddie paused. "Finn taught you how. Let him guide you." That afternoon, Juniper stood at the quarantine pen they'd sealed for months. Dust motes danced in sunbeams. Slowly, deliberately, she unlatched the door. Some stories don't end. They root and bloom again. The kits were balls of fluff and teeth, 2 silver, 1 fiery red. The red one bumbled straight to Juniper's boot, tumbling over its own paws. Juniper froze. The kit sniffed, then nudged her ankle with its cold nose. A memory flashed, Finn's first touch. Tears fell freely now. Jordan knelt, offering a bottle. The red kit latched on, tiny paws kneading. "Look at his eyes, Junie," Jordan murmured. Amber, not just brown. Wildfire amber. Outside, Zoe pressed against the pen, tail wagging slow and steady. A new chapter breathed its first. Liam raced to the fox pen, his drawing clutched tight, me and Grandpa and Alexander Finn. He peered at the kits. "Which one's Finn, Grandpa?" Jordan lifted the red kit, its belly round with milk. "Finn's right here, buddy." Liam frowned. But Finn was big. Juniper smoothed his hair. "Finn taught us how to help little ones grow brave. Like you." Liam studied the squirming kit. Then he taped his drawing to the pen. "Okay," he declared. "This one's baby Finn." The name stuck. Alexander Finn Tate too. Legacy had paws. They hiked the trail where Finn was found, Juniper, Jordan, Zoe, Liam. At the exact bend where hikers had spotted a dying fox years before, Juniper scattered Finn's ashes. Wind caught them, spiraling crimson dust into green ferns. Zoe sniffed the ground, then sat, head high, ears pricked. Liam placed a perfect maple leaf on a mossy stone. "By Finn," he whispered. High above, a red-tailed hawk circled. Juniper felt no sorrow, only completion. A wild heart had journeyed home and left love etched on the mountain. Zoe surprised them all. When baby Finn stumbled, she nudged him upright. When he yipped for food, she herded him to his bowl. She even tolerated his tail pulling. One rainy afternoon, Juniper found Zoe lying in the pen. The three kits curled against her belly like puppies. Zoe's eyes met Juniper's, calm, wise, utterly unafraid. The anxious dog had become the sanctuary's gentle matriarch. Finn's final gift wasn't just his life. It was the courage he'd planted in them all. Years later, rocking on the porch with Liam's children, Juniper watched Zoe's graying muzzle rest on young paws. Baby Finn, now a sleek, confident fox, basked in the sun, tail twitching as kits tumbled around him. Jordan's guitar played Wildwood Flower, the notes weaving through maple leaves. Margaret Willis visited often, her laughter mingling with the creek's song. And every autumn, when scarlet leaves spiraled down, Juniper would find one perfect maple leaf on her chair. She'd hold it to her cheek, feeling the ghost lick of a cold nose. Death warrants could be torn. Concrete cages could crumble. But here, in the whisper of wind and the purr of a wild heart, Fox Hollow stood eternal.